remember that night beginning with nothing more dramatic than candlelight on, polished silver and the soft hum of Christmas music drifting through my dad's dining room. It felt strangely theatrical, like I had walked onto a stage built to look like a family holiday. Before I go any further, I am honestly curious what you are doing right now while listening to this story, because when everything started for me, I was sitting at that long Christmas table in a silk dress that felt too expensive for my skin, trying to pretend I belonged. For me, the moment it began, I was smoothing my napkin across my lap and wondering if I had made a mistake. Coming back after 5 full years. My name is Julia Hart. I had just turned 32 and had finally built a quiet little life for myself in Denver. A condo that was mine, a job that kept me busy but paid the bills, routines that steadied me. I had convinced myself I was done needing my dad's approval and done hoping the house I grew up in might feel safe again. But when he called earlier that month and told me it would mean a lot if I came home for Christmas Eve, something in me softened. Or maybe it cracked. I told myself that people change, families heal, time smooths the sharp memories. So I went. And I kept telling myself it was only one night. The dining room in my dad's new house was the kind of place where nothing felt naturally placed. Everything looked arranged. A long white tablecloth. Crystal glasses that sparkled even with the dim lights. Holly branches set carefully on each napkin. My stepmom Linda loved these details, and she floated around that table with the confidence of someone who believed. She was hosting royalty. She leaned toward my dad now, tilting a bottle of red wine into his glass. When she moved, her bracelets clicked softly, like a quiet signal that she was in control of the evening. My half-sister Claire sat beside her, scrolling her phone under the table, her lip gloss catching the glow of the candles. For a moment, I watched them all with the strange feeling that I was attending someone else's family dinner. My dad glanced at Claire, in the soft way that used to be meant for me. I tried not to let it bother me. People change. That was the refrain in my head. I lifted my water glass and set it back down without drinking. Something felt tight and restless inside me, and not because of the travel. The house itself seemed to remember things I had tried to forget. Then my phone buzzed. Just one small vibration against the linen napkin in my lap, but it cut through the room and the holiday warmth, as if the temperature dropped by 20 degrees. I slid my hand under the napkin, planning to silence it like I would for any dinner. But the screen did not show a random notification. One text message, no name attached, no greeting. Do not eat anything. They know. My eyes stayed fixed on those words. My heartbeat kicked hard against my ribs. I felt the sound of the room dim, as if someone had pressed a hand over my ears. It was the kind of moment when your mind freezes, then races, then refuses to believe what it already understands. Do not eat anything. They know. I turned the screen downward, hiding it under the napkin. The muscles in my arms felt heavy and cold. I looked at the table slowly, carefully, as if my eyes might give something away if I moved too fast. Everyone else was fine, laughing, talking, passing dishes. Linda lifted the wine bottle toward me without asking. She poured a dark red stream into my glass and did not spill a drop. The air smelled like rosemary and garlic and something richer beneath it. Something thick that made the back of my throat tighten. I did not touch the glass. My mom died on Christmas week, 5 years ago. The official cause was a sudden heart episode. She had been 55, healthy, still jogging when she felt like it. I had never believed her death made sense. I could still see her, the night before she died, rubbing her forehead and saying she tasted something bitter. She could not explain, and now here I was, at another Christmas dinner, staring at a glass of red wine that looked too familiar, holding a warning from a stranger telling me not to eat. I set my hands on my lap to stop them from shaking. My dad lifted his glass. He always liked moments of control. He believed in short speeches, sharp decisions, no questions. No questions. A family man, in the way people in photographs look like family. To my family, he said. Everyone lifted their glasses. Mine stayed on the table. I pretended to adjust my napkin to hide the fact that my fingers were trembling. I looked toward the end of the table where no one sat. The place was set perfectly. The Holy Spring centered, the silverware aligned. That empty chair belonged to my mom. No one had taken it since she died. It stayed there like a portrait, or a memorial, or a warning. Claire leaned closer with a gentle grin, the kind that tries to nudge you back into the moment. You look tense, Jules. Relay. It is Christmas. Relax. as if I had that kind of power. The young man serving food moved quietly around the table. When he reached me, he set a dish of roasted carrots beside my plate. His hand brushed the edge of my napkin, and for the briefest second, his eyes met mine with a startled look, as if he knew something. As if he wanted to say something, but could not. My phone buzzed again. I let the napkin shift slightly and read the new message. They are watching. Pretend nothing is wrong. I felt a wave roll through my stomach. Not panic, exactly. More like clarity. Cold clarity. If this was a sick joke, it was an elaborate one. If it was not a joke, then someone in this room thought I was in danger. I picked up my water glass, forced myself to drink a small sip, then set it down gently. Linda watched me as she reached for her own wine, her gaze flicking to my untouched glass and then back to my face. Her smile was painted on, but her eyes were alert, measuring. "You look pale, Julia," she said with careful concern. "Long week for you, I am sure. Big city life can take a toll." I nodded lightly. "Crowded flights," I said. I thought adding something ordinary might make my voice steady. Dad smiled and told me he was glad I made it. His voice softened for a second, and part of me wanted to believe that was real, but then he reached for his wine and tipped the glass back easily, confidently, and I felt the floor move again under my certainty. The table was filled with talk. Claire complained about finals. Linda talked about the florist who did the garland on the staircase. My dad discussed a project for work. The voices blended. The laughter rose and fell, all while the warning sat inside my mind like a lit fuse. Do not eat anything. They know. They are watching. Pretend nothing is wrong. My eyes drifted toward the kitchen door. If I could step away for even 1 minute, I could think. I could breathe. I could figure out whether to trust the messages or challenge them. But if I stood up suddenly, Linda would follow me with her eyes. My dad would ask questions later. Claire would tease, thinking she was being sweet, and the room would tilt again. I took a deep breath and repeated the only reasonable sentence I could think of. Headache. Just say you have a headache. I gently set my fork down and let it make a soft clink. "Dad," I said, trying to sound normal, "I think I need to step out for a moment. The travel got to me a little. I just need some air." He nodded slowly and told me not to take long. Linda gave directions to the bathroom as if I had never been in that house. Her voice too warm, too willing to manage my movements. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked away from the table, my skin prickling at the sensation of many eyes following me, but pretending not to. The hallway felt cooler, quieter. The music softened into a distant echo. I walked past framed photos on the wall, all from the years after my mom died. I was not in most of them. My dad planted his arm around Linda in every one. My steps slowed. I stepped into the guest bathroom, closed the door, and let my back rest against it for a moment. My hands pressed to the sides of the sink. My breath came uneven. I felt the room sway for a moment before it steadied. The mirror reflected a woman who looked startled and bracing herself for something she could not yet name. I did not look like someone celebrating a holiday. I looked like someone who had just been pulled aside and told there was a quiet danger in the next room. My phone buzzed again. I looked down at the screen, and the same unseen voice spoke once more. "Do not trust anyone." All of this started long before tonight. My throat tightened. I did not know who was sending these messages, or why they knew so much about my family. I only knew that something inside me had gone completely still. That strange stillness you feel when your instincts have caught up with them. Truth your mind is running from. I leaned closer to the sink and shut my eyes just long enough to gather myself. One simple fact rose above all the noise. Whatever tonight really was, I could not go back to that table as the same daughter who had walked in, pretending nothing had ever happened in that house. I looked at myself in the mirror again, and for the first time that night, I could feel the shape of something beginning to form inside me. A shift, a question, a warning louder than the text. I drew a slow breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the bathroom door. I walked back into the dining room, trying to look like someone who had simply needed a moment, not someone who had just read a warning that made her blood run cold. The soft music, the golden light, the polished table, everything looked exactly as I had left it. Yet it all felt different now, as if I had stepped through a thin layer of glass. My seat waited for me, napkin folded neatly, water glass full again. Everyone else stayed wrapped in conversation and holiday cheer, completely unaware of the pulse in my throat. I eased into my chair and smoothed my napkin over my lap. My dad glanced up long enough to give me a polite nod, then turned back to one of his work friends who was telling a story about a fishing trip. My stepmom, Linda, flashed a warm hostess smile that did not reach her eyes. She lifted the wine bottle and tipped it toward my glass. I pressed my hand lightly against the tablecloth, not touching the glass, but making it clear I was not ready for more. "Just a headache," I said. "I will be fine." Linda gave a soft hum, as though she understood everything. She always said the right words, but there was a tension in her jaw, a tiny clench that I had started noticing more tonight. Her eyes flicked to my wine glass, then to my plate, then back to me. The way someone checks the locks more than once. Claire leaned in, swirling her own wine. "You look tense, Jules," she said. "Did someone say something?" I shook my head and kept my voice light. "Travel caught up with me." She shrugged and returned to her phone, letting the glow reflect on her face as she slid into another story about finals week at her university. She never minded being the center of her own world. She had grown up that way, buffered by our dad's attention and Linda's confidence. I glanced again at the far end of the table. The empty chair stood out against everything else, perfectly polished, perfectly set, perfectly untouched. It used to be my mom's seat. No one sat there now, not even on holidays. I had asked about it once years ago, and my dad brushed it off with a quiet comment about keeping a place in memory. Now it felt more like a reminder of everything that had shifted in this house since she was gone. I tried not to linger on that thought. I had promised myself long before stepping through that front door that I would not let nostalgia or old wounds swallow me tonight. But something about that chair pulled at me, like a missing voice humming beneath the noise. A server stepped behind me and set another dish on the table, the same one who had brushed my napkin earlier with that rattled look in his eyes. He moved quietly, his posture stiff, his movements practiced yet unsteady. When he leaned closer to adjust the carrots near my plate, I felt, rather than see, his quick glance toward me, a silent confirmation that he knew something. I kept my gaze steady on my plate. He stepped away without a word. Linda clasped her hands together suddenly and began telling my dad's coworker about a kitchen remodel she had almost done last spring. She bragged about the decorator she hired, the open shelving she wanted, the wall she had begged my dad to remove. "He would not let me touch this part of the house," she said with a soft laugh, waving a hand toward the dining room. "He insists some things should stay the same." Her voice sounded light, but the look she shot at the empty chair revealed something more complicated. I took a sip of water, partly to steady myself, and partly to hide the way my heart lurched whenever this family brushed against truths they never said aloud. The text messages still buzzed inside me like a quiet electric current. "Do not eat anything. They know. They are watching. Pretend nothing is wrong." I had not told anyone at this table. I did not dare glance at my phone now. The warning itself was already breaking me open inside. Every movement felt measured, every breath calculated to keep my expression calm. Claire leaned over again, lowering her voice. "So, you going to eat or just stare at the plate for the rest of the night?" "Just thinking," I murmured. "About what?" "Just a lot on my mind." She lifted her eyebrows like that answer was entirely predictable and returned to her bread. Claire's world never had room for my interior struggle, not when she had her own easy life to enjoy. I once envied her for that. Tonight, it made me feel strangely distant, as if we had never really been raised under the same roof. The food in front of me looked beautiful. Carrots glazed, roast beef cut perfectly, potatoes whipped until smooth. It was the kind of dinner magazines love to photograph, yet every part of it felt like something I had to defend myself from. Linda noticed me looking at the plate and smiled. "Nervous stomach from the flight?" she asked. "I get that sometimes." I nodded and forced a small smile. She lifted her wine glass and swirled the red liquid inside. It looked thick under the candlelight, almost too dark. "People think I pour too much of this stuff," she said with a laugh. "But your dad and I like keeping traditions alive." She set the bottle down beside her plate, then reached for the one near my dad's place setting and adjusted it. Only then did I notice it was not the same label as the wines she usually bought. This one looked older, imported, something special, something deliberate. My dad caught me looking at it. He smiled. "Reminds me of something your mom liked," he said. "Thought it would be nice for tonight." My throat tightened again, that same tightening that had followed me for years whenever something about my mom's last days floated near the surface. I did not want to go there. I told myself not to go there, but the texts, the wine, the empty chair, the unnerving calm in my dad's eyes when he mentioned her. It all pressed against each other like puzzle pieces too close for comfort. A gentle cough from the server startled me slightly. He had returned again, this time with more water. His hand shook faintly as he filled the glasses. I glanced up. His eyes met mine for a flicker, and in that flicker was something unmistakable. Fear. It was gone as fast as it came. He turned away, and my heart began a slow, deliberate pounding that made the room tilt for half a breath. The conversation at the table surged again as someone told a joke. My dad laughed loudly, a big warm sound that had comforted me when I was small, and unsettled me now, because it did not match the tension building in my chest. I slid my water closer and watched the condensation slip down the glass. I needed to stay grounded. Even if the ground under me was shifting, I needed to breathe. I needed to convince myself that coming tonight had not been a mistake. Claire nudged me with her elbow again. "You should eat something before you pass out," she joked. I pushed a small piece of the beef across the plate and smiled without teeth. "I will." Just pacing myself. Linda straightened at the other end of the table and lifted her wine again. "You know," she said, her voice smooth, "I think it is lovely that you joined us." "Julia, it has been too long. Your dad missed you more than he says." Her smile softened, almost tender, and for a second I almost believed her. Then her eyes slid to my glass again, scanning whether it had been touched. Just then, at the other end of the table, the chandelier lights flickered slightly. Not a big surge, not dramatic, just a soft dip. My dad barely noticed, finishing his story to his friend, but I saw Linda glance upward, quick and sharp. It was such a small thing, a tiny change in the room, but it reminded me how nothing tonight felt naturally happening. Maybe that flicker was nothing more than old wiring, or a power shift from the kitchen. Or maybe the universe was nudging me back toward what I already knew. The room carried too many pieces that did not fit neatly together. The wine, the text messages, the server's eyes, the empty chair, the way Linda watched me instead of celebrating with everyone else, the way my dad looked relieved rather than joyful that I had come tonight. I steadied my breathing, leaned back slightly in my chair, and let the voices around me fade into the background. Something was wrong in this house. I did not know yet what shape the wrongness took, but it moved around me like a quiet shadow. I tried one last time to convince myself that I was overthinking. Then the server reappeared. He bent near me, reaching for the gravy boat, and whispered one word so quietly I doubted myself. "Careful." He backed away before I could react. My fingers curled around the edge of my napkin. I did not move. I did not turn. I did not look at anyone. I just breathed. In, out. The table felt too warm. The food looked too perfect. The empty chair felt too present. And the warnings, both on my phone and from a stranger standing inches from me, sat like a weight on my bones. I folded my napkin again, slower this time, and looked down the length of the table at the candles trembling in the heat. No one here knew I had already made a decision the moment I stepped away from the table the first time. No one here knew the text messages had ignited something I had been avoiding for years. No one here knew that tonight I was no longer the girl who tiptoed around this family, waiting to be accepted. I looked at my untouched plate, then at the empty chair. I felt the shift inside me as clear as the flicker of those lights. Whatever this dinner was, whatever secrets had been buried in these walls, they were starting to rise. And I knew deep in my chest that I was not leaving this house without answers. The next moment, the servers opened the kitchen door again, and I heard the low hum of machinery from within. It reminded me suddenly that the person who sent those messages might be closer than I realized. I lifted my water and took a sip to steady myself. Someone at the table called my name. I turned my head slowly, bracing myself for whatever came next. It was my dad. He sat with his hand lightly resting on the stem of his glass, his expression polite but unreadable. He said he wanted a family picture before dessert. He smiled as he said it, but everything in the room felt tight around the edges. Everyone started shifting in their chairs. Claire smoothed her hair. Linda lifted her napkin and dabbed her lipstick. My dad stood halfway, waiting for me to follow his lead. I rose because not rising would have drawn more attention than I could manage. The server hurried over with a camera and positioned us near the tree. My dad stood in the center. Linda looped her arm through his. Claire tucked herself against his side. There was a small empty space beside the armchair where I was supposed to fit. Myself, in like the last piece of an almost finished puzzle. I moved into the space. The air felt heavier there. My dad placed his hand on my back lightly, a gesture that should have felt comforting. It did not. I could feel the pressure of it through my dress, the way someone touches a door to make sure it is really closed. The server counted to 3. Everyone smiled. I did too. My lips shaped the expression automatically, even as my stomach tightened. When the flash went off, it lit the room in a way that made everything look frozen. For one moment, we looked like a family who belonged together. Then the light faded, and the illusion went with it. My dad thanked the server and told us all to head back to the table. I lingered near the tree, pretending to admire an ornament. I needed a moment. My breath felt shallow and my skin prickled, the way it does when intuition starts rising faster than thought. I did not want to go back to that table. I did not want to lift another fork or pretend to drink from that glass or sit under Linda's watchful eyes. So when everyone turned and moved toward their seats, I stepped quietly in the opposite direction. No one noticed. Or if they did, they let me go. I slipped into the hallway and felt the warmth of the dining room give way to cooler air. The sound of voices faded behind me. The quiet pressed gently around my body, and I let my shoulders drop for the first time all night. The house was dimmer here. The bulbs were softer. The shadows were longer. I passed the wall of framed photos again and forced myself not to look closely. I was done studying the past on that hallway. I needed something more solid than memories. I kept walking, my feet moving before I had fully decided where they were taking me. I reached the staircase and rested my hand on the banister. The polished wood felt cold. The upstairs hallway stretched out in front of me like a quiet path I had followed 1,000 times in childhood. Yet tonight it felt unfamiliar, as if the house itself had shifted over the years to accommodate someone else's life. At the far end of the hall was my mom's old room. I felt something in me tighten and soften at the same time. I had not stepped inside it in years. After she passed, Dad closed the door and left it that way for months. When he finally opened it again, he had cleared out some of her belongings, moved others, sorted and donated things quietly. Then Linda came and took over the rest of the house. That room became the only place she never entered. Maybe that was why I ended up there now. I walked slowly toward it, each step measured. The carpet muffled the sound of my movements. My heart felt like it was beating against a wall. When I reached the door, I placed my hand on the knob. It was cool, almost too cool. I stood still for a moment listening. The house creaked softly, settling in the winter night. I turned the knob. The door opened with the faintest whisper of sound. The smell hit me first. Not perfume exactly, just a faint trace of something floral and old that reminded me of her. Sweaters. The room felt untouched, suspended between years. The curtains hung loosely. The bedspread was smoothed over neatly. Her dresser stood against the wall. The mirror still streaked faintly where she used to wipe it with the corner of her sleeve. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air felt thicker here, heavy with things left undone. I walked to the dresser slowly. My fingers drifted across the surface. Dust had gathered in thin lines behind her jewelry box, the wooden one my dad had bought her on their 10th anniversary. I remembered the sound of its little hinge when she opened it every morning. I lifted the lid. Inside lay small earrings, a delicate chain, a hairpin she used when she styled her hair up, and resting on a folded piece of velvet was the brooch she wore on special occasions. A gold leaf with small etched lines, warm-toned and simple but elegant. I lifted it gently, feeling its weight settle into my palm. It felt heavier than I remembered. I turned it over, tracing the pin with my thumb. Something clicked under the pressure, a tiny, subtle sound. I frowned and pressed again. Another click. The brooch vibrated faintly, and a soft burst of static filled the room. My heart kicked hard. I held it closer to my ear. Voices filtered through the crackling sound. Faint at first, then clearer. I knew my mom's voice instantly. The softness of it. The tremor in it. She sounded frightened. She said something about a bottle. Something about not feeling right. Her voice wavered. Then came my dad's voice. Sharp. Impatient. Telling her she was imagining things. Telling her to stop making problems. Underneath that, like a faint thread, was Linda's voice. Quiet but pointed. Something about timing. Something about not wanting to deal with this again. The recording cut in and out. I could not breathe. My hand shook so violently I had to use my other hand to steady it. The brooch warmed slightly in my palm as the audio sputtered, then played another fragment. My mom again, asking him to listen. My dad told her to stop. A thump. A scrape. Then static. The air in the room felt too thin. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, gripping the brooch with both hands. My pulse roared in my ears. My chest tightened. This was no ordinary decoration. She had recorded them. She had tried to keep proof. She had known something. She had been afraid. And whatever she had suspected that night, whatever she had tasted or felt, she had been right to fear it. The brooch clicked again, the recording fading in one last faint stretch of sound. My mom whispered something about being careful. Someone else told her to calm down. Then silence. Soft, final silence. I closed my eyes. I felt grief rise and mingle with something sharper, something I had not let myself feel fully until now. I had spent years drowning questions, pushing aside doubts, silencing instinct. Tonight, every suppressed instinct came alive at once. My mom had not died peacefully. She had not died suddenly. She had died knowing she was in danger, and she had tried to leave a trail. The brooch lay warm against my palm like a heartbeat. I drew in one long breath, steadying myself. I slipped the brooch into the inside pocket of my dress, pressing the fabric flat over it. I stood. The woman who walked into that room was not the same woman standing there now. Something had shifted. Something had sharpened. I looked around once more, taking in the stillness of the space. Her sweater draped over a chair, the book she had been reading with a page folded, the framed photo of me on her nightstand. Then I walked to the door. I left the room quietly, closing the door behind me with a soft click. The hallway stretched out ahead, lit by low, golden bulbs. At the far end, I could hear faint sounds from the dining room. Laughter. Plate being moved. The sound of a glass filled again. I rested my fingers against the brooch hidden beneath my dress. Whatever had started in this house years ago was not finished. And tonight, for the first time, I intended to finish it. I took one step forward, then another, moving back toward the stairs, knowing everything that came next would not be gentle. Because now I know the truth, and I knew who had been sitting at that table, pretending they did not. I walked down the hall with the brooch pressed against my chest, its hidden weight warming through the fabric. The house felt different now. Not quieter, not louder, just sharper, as if every sound and shadow had edges I had not noticed before. Distant voices drifted from the dining room, muffled by walls and closed doors. Someone laughed. Someone clinked a glass. All of it, layered over the faint, trembling echo of my mom's recorded voice still ringing in my memory. When I reached the top of the stairs, I paused. I needed a moment to steady myself before stepping back into the light. I put my hand on the banister. My fingers felt cold against the wood. The brooch felt hot. I ran my thumb over it through the fabric. A promise formed inside me. A simple one. A steady one. I was going to listen. Really listen. To every tone, every slip, every accidental confession that floated across that dinner table. I descended the stairs one slow step at a time. By the time I reached the bottom, I had arranged my face into something calm. Something neutral. Something no one would question. The dining room door was open again. The warm glow spilled into the hallway. I could see silhouettes moving, hear the scrape of serving spoons, the polite rhythm of conversation. I stepped inside. Everything looked untouched. A staged photograph brought back to life. My dad sat at the head of the table, folded into a conversation with his coworker. Claire laughed loudly at something on her phone. Linda leaned back in her chair, swirling wine with a relaxed, pretty kind of grace that women like her perfected over years of practice. No one noticed the shift in me. I slipped back into my seat quietly. A few people looked up and smiled. No one asked where I had gone. That was always the pattern. They cared only as long as caring was convenient. I folded my napkin across my lap again and glanced around the table. The food remained untouched in front of me. The wine glass still glimmered with its dark, unmoving surface. The servant, the same young man whose eyes had been speaking louder than his words, came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh rolls. When he saw me back in my seat, his steps hesitated for a fraction of a second. He adjusted quickly and continued around the table. When he reached me, he set the basket near my elbow. Up close, I could see a nervous sheen of sweat along his hairline. His hand trembled slightly as he placed a small plate of butter beside my water. He leaned in just enough for his voice to reach me under the noise. Stay aware. He straightened, eyes flicking toward the others, and moved on. I breathed slowly through my nose, letting his warning settle beside the weight of the brooch. My dad looked my way then. Not long, just long enough to register something. Maybe I'm quiet. Maybe my return. Maybe the untouched wine that sat exactly where Linda had placed it. Everything all right? He asked. His voice sounded warm enough to fool anyone else. I nodded. Just needed to stretch my legs. He accepted that answer too easily. Linda gave me a soft, assessing smile, like she was trying to read whether my absence had been for a headache or something else. Then she lifted the wine again and refreshed the glasses of the guests near her. She did not offer mine this time. She simply looked at it and kept her hands still. A choice. A calculation. Someone across the table asked my dad a question about work. He dove into a story, comfortable and animated. Claire chimed in with something playful. The conversations layered over each other. building a wall of noise that almost hid the rising tension beneath it. I kept my hands folded neatly around my napkin. I listened closely. My dad talked about a difficult client. Linda explained a new landscaping plan. Someone mentioned how beautifully the dinner had been prepared. Compliments drifted toward the kitchen. But the young server stayed out of sight now. I wondered if he was afraid to appear too much near me. Across the table, someone asked my dad how old the house was. He said it had been built in the late 1950s, remodeled a few times, and that some rooms still needed work. He said he did not like messing with the original foundation. It had history, he said. Funny, Linda added lightly, because you did not mind redoing the master bedroom. His smile tightened, almost imperceptible. That room needed changes, he said. Their eyes held each other a moment too long. I watched them quietly. An exchange like that might seem ordinary to anyone else, but with the brooch in my pocket humming its truth against my chest, nothing between them looked ordinary anymore. Claire reached for another roll and shrugged. This house always creeped me out a little, she said. Especially that storage room upstairs. The one on the end of the hall? She glanced toward the ceiling. There is something weird about that room. Linda shot her a sharp look. That is not a storage room. Claire blinked. Well, it is not like anyone uses it. I think it used to be Mom's room, right? I felt something inside me go still. My dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He lowered it silently. His expression barely moved, but something in his eyes shifted when he glanced at Claire, then at me. He said, "It is just an old room. We keep it closed. Too much dust." I held his gaze for a second, long enough for him to look away. The table went quiet for a few heartbeats. Linda smiled quickly, smoothing the silence. "Dessert soon," she said cheerfully. "The pecan pie is cooling now." The room breathed again. I took a slow breath and let my fingers slide across the napkin. My pulse had steadied. The noise around me had softened into something I could filter through easily. I knew now that the brooch had captured the truth my mom had been afraid to. Speak openly. Whatever had happened to her had not been an accident. She had known she was in danger. She had known someone close to her was not who they pretended to be, and she had recorded them. I reached into my pocket and touched the brooch gently under the table. The metal felt warm again, alive, like a small heartbeat of its own. The door to the kitchen swung open, and the server stepped out holding the dessert plates. His eyes slipped to mine for just a flicker before he looked away. I could see his fear as clearly as the candle flames trembling across the table. He placed a slice of pie in front of each person, moving with a too careful rhythm. When he reached me, he set the plate down with steady hands, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Thank you." He blinked once, then he moved away. My dad picked up his fork. Linda set down her wine. Claire stretched her arms overhead, then dipped her fork into the pie with delight. I stared down at the plate in front of me. The filling glistened. The crust was golden. It looked perfect. I did not touch it. My dad noticed. "Not hungry?" he asked. I lifted my water glass instead, just pacing myself. Linda laughed lightly. Julia is always so careful. She used to read every ingredient before taking a bite when she was little. She looked at me with a soft, almost nostalgic smile that did not match the tension sitting in her shoulders. Some habits never go away. She took a bite of her own pie and kept her eyes on me as she chewed. My dad watched too. I felt the weight of both their gazes like pressure on my skin. I set my water down gently. The brooch warmed under my touch again, reminding me of every broken fragment of audio I had heard upstairs. Wrong bottle. Stop pushing me. Not tonight. You promised. My mom's voice, their voices. The crack in their marriage. The fear she had tried to hide. The sound of something falling. The static. The silence. I looked up from my plate and let my gaze move from my dad to Linda and back again. Not accusing, not dramatic, just steady. My dad shifted in his seat. Linda lifted her wine again. Claire kept eating, oblivious. Someone asked my dad another question. He answered it, but he kept glancing at me between sentences, small, quick glances that made it clear something in him had changed. Maybe he sensed a difference in me. Maybe he saw something he had not expected. The empty chair at the end of the table caught my eye again. The place my mom would have sat tonight. If she were alive. If she had been believed. If she had been safe. If someone had not silenced her warnings. My stomach tightened. The server returned to clear the first plates, and for the first time that night, he let his hand rest lightly on the back of my chair as he reached past me. A whisper of contact. A silent message. Stay steady. I did not speak. I did not move. I let the room breathe around me. The voices, the wine, the food, the glances, the brooch. All of it was part of something I had walked into without knowing, but now I understood the shape of it. Danger was not loud in this house. It was quiet, polite, dressed in holiday clothes, served at a perfect table. And it had been here long before I returned. I folded my napkin slowly and felt the brooch warm against my skin. I was not going to confront anyone tonight. Not yet. Not before I had enough to make sure the truth could not be buried again. So I sat back in my chair. I lifted my water glass. I looked at each person at that table one by one, and I listened, really listened, because the next step was not rushing into the kitchen or raising my voice or demanding answers. The next step was catching them slip. The next step was letting the truth walk to me. And in that moment, as Linda lifted her wine, and my dad looked away too quickly, and the candles flickered in a way they had not earlier tonight, I knew it was already happening. All I had to do was wait. And this house filled with memories and lies and unfinished stories would show me exactly what I needed to see. I barely slept that night. After the last plates were cleared and the guests had finally left, the whole house fell into a silence that felt too thick to breathe. Linda went upstairs early, claiming she was tired. Claire disappeared into her room with her phone and her headphones. My dad lingered by the fireplace in the living room, staring at the flames longer than necessary, refilling his glass from a different bottle. I stayed in the guest room at the end of the hall, the one that had once been a playroom when I was small. I sat on the bed with my back against the headboard and the brooch in my hands, its metal pressing into my palm like a small, insistent truth. I pressed the hidden button on the back again. The tiny device crackled to life. My mom's voice came through in pieces, like radio static. I could not catch every word, but the ones that broke through were enough. Wrong bottle. Then a rush of static. You said you would stop. Another burst of noise. I am not crazy. Something is wrong. Her voice shook when she said that last part. My dad's voice cut in, harder, clipped. You always do this. More static. The word dramatic slipped through. Then another phrase. You are in the way. Then nothing. I swallowed hard and pressed the button again. A new fragment surfaced. My mom. Quieter now. This is about her future, not mine. I do not care about the money. Another pause. You can take whatever you want. Just do not hurt her. Her. There was only one hero that mattered like that. Claire. More static. A scrape. A sound like glass on wood. My dad's voice again, lower. It is already done. Then a faint third voice, Linda's, whispering something I could not make out, followed by my mom saying one last line, clearer than anything before. If anything happens to me, this does not go away. Then the recording sputtered and died. I sat there, my fingers numb around the tiny device. My brain tried to deny what my ears had heard, to rewrite it into something less damning. But the words would not soften. You are in the way. This is about her future. You can take whatever you want. It is already done. My mom knew they were planning something. Not just arguing, planning. And she had worried about Claire, about what my dad and Linda might be willing to do under the name of providing for her future. Money, inheritance, insurance, control, it all spun in my mind, a web I had not wanted to see before. I set the brooch on the nightstand and pressed my fingertips to my eyes. The room felt too small. The walls are too close. My phone buzzed next to me. For one wild second, I thought it might be my mom. That is how far gone my nerves were by then. Old habits, old grief. I picked it up. Another message from the unknown number. You found something, did you not? I stared at it. My fingers moved before I could talk myself out of it. Who is this? There was a pause long enough for me to hear the furnace click on in the hallway, the low hum of the vents. Then another text appeared. Someone who has watched too much and stayed quiet too long. My throat tightened. Are you in this house? Yes. Why warn me? Because your mom tried to fight and she lost. You might still have a chance. I looked toward the door as if I might see someone standing outside it with a phone in their hand. How do you know what happened to her? Another pause. My palms were damp because I was here then too. A chill went through me. The house suddenly felt full of ghosts and secrets and eyes I could not see. I thought about the young server and the way his gaze kept catching mine, the way his hands shook each time he came near my plate. Are you the one from the kitchen? I typed. Yes. I exhaled slowly. The next message came quickly. I was dish staff when your mom died. I saw the bottle. I heard pieces of the argument. No one believed me. Your dad had lawyers. I almost lost my job. Why did you stay? Because I promised her I would keep an eye on you if I ever got the chance. I did not think you would come back. My chest ached. A promise. My mom had been dying and still thinking about me. What do you know? I wrote. Enough to know that wine was not safe. Enough to know this one is not either. I looked at the brooch again, its small shape gleaming faintly in the low lamplight. I picked it up and felt the metal warm in my hand. I am not going to drink anything in this house, I wrote back. Good. He added another line. But you need more than staying alive. You need proof. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. Proof. The word felt heavy. It was what my mom had tried to gather and hide. It was what no one had listened to. I have this, I wrote. I described the brooch and the recording in a few short words. His reply took longer this time. When it came, it was only 3 words. She was smart. I felt tears sting the back of my eyes. You cannot take them on with a feeling, he continued. You need something fresh, recently. Something no one can explain away. I stared at that line until it blurred. Something that showed who they really were, now, not just who they had been then. An idea began to form at the edges of my mind. It scared me. It also steadied me. I looked down at the brooch again. My mom had used it to record what they said when they thought she was powerless. I could use it to do the same. You still have access to the security system, I typed. Only parts of it, he replied. They removed most cameras inside after your mom died. Only a few are left. But audio is weaker. You would need something on you. I closed my fingers around the brooch until it pressed hard into my palm. I have something, I wrote. There was a long pause this time. When the next message appeared, the tone felt heavier. If you are thinking what I think you are, be careful. They are not clumsy when it comes to protecting themselves. I sat there a long time, phone in one hand, brooch in the other. Careful. My mom had been careful. She had been cautious. She had tried to warn. She had still ended up dead. Maybe being careful was not enough anymore. I set the phone aside and focused on the brooch. I turned it over in the soft light, studying the tiny seam on the back, the hidden switch, the way it had survived years in a dresser drawer without losing its charge. Completely. I had no idea how long it would last, or how clear it would record now. But I knew one thing. If it had caught that much with my mom, it could have caught more with me. I pinned it to the inside of my cardigan, just below my collarbone, where a scarf or my hair could cover it. The metal felt cool against my skin at first, then it warmed gradually, like it was waking up. I pressed the button once. No sound came this time, but a faint vibration told me the little device was alive, listening. I walked to the mirror over the dresser and looked at myself. I did not recognize the woman in the reflection completely. There was too much in her eyes, too much knowledge, too much history, too much determination. I had always thought revenge was loud and explosive, crying in public, throwing things, screaming. Tonight I understood a different kind, the quiet kind, the kind that moved slowly and watched and waited and gathered what it needed. Before it spoke, I turned out the lamp and lay down on the bed without changing. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I could hear the faint sounds of the house sleeping, pipes ticking, the clock in the hallway chiming softly when it reached another hour, a door closing somewhere nearby. Thoughts ran in loops in my head. My mom's voice. You are in the way. This is about her future. If anything happens to me, this does not go away. The server's texts. You might still have a chance. You need proof. The wine in my glass, untouched. The empty chair at the table, the way my dad had looked away when Claire mentioned my mom's room. Sometime near morning, my body surrendered, and I drifted into a thin, restless sleep. I woke to weak winter light slipping around the edges of the curtains, and a dull ache behind my eyes. My clothes were wrinkled, my hair was tangled, the brooch still lay warm against my skin, a small, constant pressure. Voices murmured downstairs. The clink of dishes, the faint smell of coffee drifted up the stairwell. I sat up slowly. My phone buzzed. The unknown number again. Are you all right? I typed back that I was. They are planning brunch, he wrote. The same wine as on the counter. I can see the label from the service door. My stomach turned. You sure? I wrote. Positive. He added, I can try to swap it, but he keeps it close. For a moment, I almost texted him to stay out of it, to keep his job. to protect himself. But then I thought of the promise he said he made to my mom, and I thought of the promise I had just made to myself. "Not yet," I wrote. "Let them think everything is normal." A long pause. "Then, if you stay, you need to be ready." I was already pinning my hair back and straightening my clothes in the mirror. I pressed the brooch again, feeling the soft vibration that meant it was recording. It sat hidden under my cardigan now, invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. I passed my mom's old room on the way to the stairs. I did not look inside. I did not need to. I carried her voice with me now, pressed against my heart. The sounds from the kitchen grew clearer as I descended. Linda's laugh reached me first, followed by my dad's lower tone. Words drifted up. "Keep it simple. She does not have to stay. She should see we have moved on." I paused halfway down, my hand curling around the banister. I forced my feet to keep moving. In the kitchen, I found them standing near the island. My dad held a mug of coffee. Linda stood beside him with a recipe card in one hand, her other resting near the bottle of wine on the counter. The same label, the same shape, the same quiet thread. "Good morning," my dad said, his voice smooth. "Sleep all right?" I nodded and gave a small answer. Linda smiled brightly and reached for a pan. "We are doing a late brunch," she said. "Thought we could all eat together before you head back to Denver." I stepped farther into the room, letting the brooch do its silent work. I asked what she was making. She listed off eggs and bacon and something sweet from the oven. Then she picked up the wine and held it up to the light, as if admiring it. "Thought maybe we would finish this with the meal," she added. "Waste not." Her eyes met mine briefly. I held her gaze and smiled. Something cold flickered through her expression, quickly covered. My dad sipped his coffee and watched us both. I moved closer to the island, feeling the tiny recorder humming softly with every breath I took. I was not ready to accuse. Not yet. First, I needed them to talk, to let their guard down, to say the kind of things people say when they believe the worst is over and no one is paying attention. The brooch rested warm against my skin. My mom's last words on that recording echoed in my mind. "If anything happens to me, this does not go away." I intended to make sure of that. I pulled out a stool at the island and sat down, settling into what I knew had to come next. I would let them think they were still directing this story, while I quietly recorded a new ending. The young server stood in the doorway as if someone had pushed him there. His breath came fast and his hands hung stiff at his sides. For a moment, the room froze around him. Linda's wine glass hovered halfway toward her mouth. Claire paused with her fork touching her plate. My dad's eyes narrowed the way they did when he sensed something he did not want to face. The server opened his mouth once, closed it, then looked straight at me. It lasted less than a heartbeat, but I felt it like a hand gripping my arm. My dad broke the silence first. "Something wrong?" The server blinked. "No, sir. Just checking if you needed anything else." His voice cracked barely at the end. He turned too quickly to leave. Linda's eyes followed him out of the room, sharp and cold. My dad watched him with a displeased frown that almost looked curious. I felt the brooch warm against my chest. Every sound belonged to it now. Every slip. Every tone. After the server disappeared, my dad set his glass down with a firmer sound than necessary. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "I will check the heating vent in the storage hall," he said. "Something rattled last night." Claire shrugged as if it was nothing. Linda nodded once with her carefully controlled smile. She told him to take his time. But I felt it. His excuse was too sudden, too pointed. He did not go to fix anything. He went to observe, to verify, to see who was moving where. He wanted to see if I followed him. I did not. Not yet. The room shifted again. Linda smiled at me in a soft, almost maternal way. Her eyes were calculating behind it. "You doing all right, Julia?" I reached for my water, not my fork. "Just tired. This house brings back a lot." "What kind of memories?" she asked lightly. I shrugged. "Holidays, old routines, my mom's decorations." Her smile fixed harder. She picked up her fork and cut a piece of her food with a bit too much force. "Nostalgia can be tricky," she said. "It makes things feel heavier than they are." I let my eyes drift to the wine bottle. The brooch hummed again with faint warmth. Then came the first crack. Claire set down her fork with a sigh and leaned back in her chair. "I do not get why we have to keep that upstairs room locked," she said. "It is creepy. Every time I walk past it, I feel like someone is inside." Linda stiffened. "Nothing is locked. It is just a storage room." Claire looked annoyed. "You know what I mean. It feels off. Dad never lets anyone go in there. Not even you." Linda set her jaw. I do not want to talk about that room. The brooch caught every word, every drop of tension, every slip. Claire rolled her eyes. Relax. I am not asking to move in. I watched Linda carefully now. Her posture looks sculpted. Her shoulders are tight, her hands too still on her wineglass. The upstairs room, the room that used to be my mom's, the room where I found the brooch. Linda's reaction was louder than anything she had said. I studied her face openly. She caught the look and adjusted her posture as if straightening herself from the inside. My dad's footsteps returned down the hallway. A moment later, he stepped inside. He carried nothing. He had checked nothing, but something in his expression had changed. He looked at me first. Always first. The longest. Claire said something about needing more napkins. Linda stood up to go to the kitchen. My dad sank into his chair slowly, as if lowering himself into a decision. I felt my body still. My pulse slowed to a steady beat. Then he cleared his throat. Julia. He said my name in the tone he used when he wanted the room to shrink to just one person. My spine straightened before I could stop it. He reached for his coffee cup, holding it in both hands as if warming them. His eyes stayed on me. Last night, you were gone for a while. He said it casually. Almost. I nodded. I wanted some air. He studied my face. Long. Almost too long. You went upstairs, too. I let out a small laugh. I needed something from my bag. He did not blink. Did you go into your mom's old room? There it was, the first direct question. The first time my dad had acknowledged that room since the funeral. The brooch warmed so sharply it almost felt alive. My voice stayed light. Why his jaw worked once. She kept things in there she did not want people touching. Linda returned then, carrying a stack of napkins. She paused when she saw his expression. She glanced between us and set the napkins down slowly, as if placing something fragile. I swallowed and kept my tone steady. I only got my sweater. My dad looked unconvinced. Claire saved the moment without meaning to. She reached for the fruit plate and accidentally knocked her fork off the table. It clattered to the floor, loud and startling. Everyone flinched. My dad finally looked away from me. Linda picked up the fork and brushed it off with a cloth napkin. Then she stopped moving completely. Her eyes were fixed on the wine bottle. There was a faint noise outside the room. A low hum. Then a click. The same click I heard last night outside the hall. It came from the service corridor. The server. My dad heard it too. His head lifted slightly. His expression tightened. Something in him changed shape. I felt it, like a shift in the air. He stood again. Where is that boy? Linda said. He was probably in the storage pantry. My dad left without a word. As soon as he stepped into the hall, Linda sat down heavily, her shoulders dropping in a way I had never seen. She rubbed her forehead as though something long concealed had begun to bruise through the surface. Claire kept eating, unaware. I watched Linda. I really watched her. She looked tired. Not surface tired, deeply tired. Fear is tired. I leaned in slightly. If something is wrong, I can help. Her eyes snapped to mine. For a moment, she looked like a trapped animal. Then she smiled, but the smile trembled. Nothing is wrong, she said. She tried to lift her wine, but her hand shook too much. She set it back down. My dad's voice echoed faintly from the hallway, raised, sharp. Too sharp. I could not hear the words, only the tone. Anger. Panic. Claire frowned. Dad never yells at staff. Linda stared at the doorway. He never used to. Used to. The brooch hummed again, growing warmer, as if urging me to listen, to watch, to record. My dad's voice rose again, louder. A second voice answered. The server. Then silence. When my dad finally stepped back into the dining room, he looked different, too calm, too controlled. His hands were steady, but only because he was forcing them to be. He sat, and in the quietest voice he said a sentence that made the hairs on my neck rise. We need to leave this behind. All of us. Linda closed her eyes. Claire blinked. My dad looked directly at me. Especially you. Time slowed. My lungs tightened. The brooch hummed like a second heartbeat. I folded my hands slowly in my lap. Leave what behind? I asked softly. He watched me, studied me, calculate me. Before he could answer, the server appeared again. He had stepped into the room without being noticed. His face looked pale and strained. He carried nothing. Not towels, not dishes, nothing. He stood just inside the doorway. Claire looked up. Linda turned. My dad stiffened instantly. The server swallowed hard and spoke with a quiet voice that trembled at the edges. "I know what you did." Silence detonated across the table like a shockwave. My chair felt bolted to the floor. My dad's eyes hardened in a way I had only seen once before in my life. Linda whispered something under her breath. Claire looked terrified. The server continued. His voice grew stronger, though his hands shook. "I learned about the bottle 5 years ago. And the bottle now. And the room upstairs. And the way she died." He meant my mom. He meant everything. My dad rose so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Get out," he said. The server did not move. Linda covered her mouth. Claire froze. I touched the brooch without thinking. It was recording every word. The server looked at me then. Not for long. Just long enough to tell me what I already knew in my bones. "Time's up." He turned and darted toward the service corridor. My dad lunged after him. Claire screamed. Linda shouted my dad's name, and I stayed in my seat, gripping the brooch against my chest, knowing the moment had arrived. The moment the truth would stop hiding, the moment everything would break open. I rose slowly, feeling the weight of years pressing on my shoulders, the weight of my mom, the weight of the recording, the weight of this house. I stepped into the hallway as Claire cried behind me, and Linda begged my dad to stop. At the far end of the corridor, a door slammed, then another, then silence. The brooch hummed warm and steady against my heart, and I walked forward into the quiet, knowing the next room I entered would change everything. The hallway stretched out in front of me, long and quiet, the air carrying a weight that felt stitched from years of secrets. My footsteps sounded soft on the wood floor, too soft for the pounding in my chest. Somewhere in the house, a door clicked shut. Then nothing. Complete stillness. I held the brooch against my chest through the fabric of my dress. It felt warm now, warmer than it had ever been, as if the tiny recorder inside it understood what was about to happen. Behind me, voices rose and fell. Linda called out for my dad. Claire cried softly. A chair scraping across the dining room floor, all of it distant, muffled, like the house was trying to swallow the noise. I reached the end of the hallway. The door to the service corridor stood slightly open. A faint draft brushed my arm. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The corridor smelled of cleaning supplies and old wood. The server stood halfway down the narrow space. His back rested against the wall, his chest rising and falling like he had run a mile. He looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. I closed the door behind me. He swallowed hard. "I am sorry. I did not mean to drag you into this." I shook my head slowly. "You did not drag me anywhere. I have been walking toward this for a long time." His eyes glistened with something like guilt. "They know you found something." I touched the brooch again. "I found enough." He nodded. "Your mom tried to warn people. She really did. She told the older staff something was wrong before she died. People were scared to listen. And then your dad replaced everyone." I felt a cold ache grow in my chest. Replaced everyone. The server looked toward the back exit as if expecting someone to storm through it. He lowered his voice. "I heard them talking last week. Your dad said you were starting to ask questions. Linda said the past was going to ruin everything, and they mentioned the wine." I felt something sharp inside me. The wine. Always the wine. He took a small step closer. "I followed you upstairs last night. I knew you went into her room. I heard something playing, and then I knew you knew." My throat tightened. I wish I had known sooner. He shook his head. "They were careful after she died. Too careful. But this time, they messed up. They were fighting before dinner. Something about a document they needed to destroy." My mind flashed to the newspaper clipping I had found. The report. The brooch. The way my dad had looked at me across the table. The server rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I should not be talking right now. Your dad already chased me through here once. He could come back any second." Right then, a heavy footstep echoed from the far end of the house. We both froze. Another step. Slow. Heavy. Measured. He whispered, "You need to go." I stood still. My breath moved shallow in my chest. The air between us thickened. The next footstep was closer. He grabbed my arm gently. "Now." Back through the dining room. Before he sees us together. I pulled my arm free. "No, I cannot run again." He stared at me as if he did not understand. I lifted the brooch, letting the faint red light blink between us. It is recording. His eyes widened. You are going to confront them. I nodded. He shook his head quickly. You do not know what they are capable of. I have seen him lose control. I have heard her say things that chilled me. I knew all of it. But the fear did not grip me the way it once had. I stepped forward. Thank you. For the warning. For the truth. For everything. He looked like he wanted to say more, but another footstep echoed, this one closer than the last. He backed away quickly, disappearing out the side door into the cold night air. I was alone now. Completely alone. I walked carefully back toward the dining room, each step grounding me deeper into a new kind of calm. Not the frozen calm of fear, but a steadier one. The kind that comes when you decide you will not be silent anymore. When I stepped back into the dining room, all eyes shot to me. Claire looked up with her cheeks wet, her voice shaking. Dad is acting crazy. What is going on? Linda stood near the wine bottle, her hands gripping the back of a chair so hard her knuckles looked white. Her breath came in sharp pulls. My dad stepped out from the other doorway, blocking the hall behind him. His face was tight, but his eyes were the most telling. Wide, dark, alert, watching me, like he had been waiting for me to return. I did not sit. I did not move toward the table. I stayed exactly where I was. My dad's voice came out steady but forced. The boy is gone. He will not be bothering us again, Linda whispered softly. He knew too much. Claire stared between them. What are you talking about? My dad ignored her. His gaze stayed locked on me. Julia, come sit down. I shook my head gently. His jaw ticked once. You have something you want to say. I can see it. I reached up slowly and touched the brooch pinned beneath my dress. The tiny red light glowed against my fingers. Linda stiffened instantly. My dad's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Claire stared at the brooch like she had never noticed it before. I lowered my hand. Yes, I want to say something. The room went so quiet I could hear the faint crackle of the candles on the dead table. I stepped closer. I found a recording last night. In her room. Linda looked down. Her shoulders shook. My dad's voice dropped, almost a warning. What recording? I watched him carefully. My mom recorded the night before she died. She recorded the fight in the kitchen. She recorded you. Claire gasped. Dad, what is she talking about? I did not look away from him. She recorded what happened with the wine. Linda's knees seemed to buckle for a moment, and she reached for the chair. My dad moved slowly toward the table. The only sound was the faint scrape of his shoe across the floor. His voice was cold and quiet. That recording was destroyed years ago. It was not. Linda whispered, Oh God. Claire's voice trembled. What did you do? My dad snapped. Enough. But Claire cried louder. What did you do? I stepped closer to the table. The brooch hummed softly. The room tightened like it had been pulled inward by invisible threads. My dad pointed sharply at the table, as if that could make everything normal again. You are misunderstanding things. Your mom was sick. She was confused. She imagined threats that were not there. She made mistakes and got herself hurt. The lie fell heavy between us. Too heavy. Linda's head jerked up at his words like she had been slapped. That is not what you told me. He cut his eyes at her. Stop talking. Julia, he said slowly. You do not know what you are stirring up. Leave it alone. I shook my head. She died because of you. His face changed then. Not anger, not fear. Something colder. Acceptance. Linda's voice finally broke completely. I did not want her dead. I swear I did not want her dead. I only helped get her sick. You said it would wear off. You said she would be fine. You said she would just need a doctor. Claire screamed. My dad slammed his hand down on the table so hard the wine bottle shook. Linda shut her mouth instantly. And that was when the house turned on him. My brooch flicked a brighter red light. He saw it. His face was drained of color. His voice thinned. What is that? I pressed my fingers over it. The truth. He stepped back. You are recording this? Linda gasped. You cannot record in this house. You cannot. I lifted my chin. You do not own the truth anymore. He looked like he might lunge for me. Then he stopped. His chest rose. Fell. Rose again. The calculation behind his eyes collapsed into something rawer, something closer to the man my mom feared. Claire sobbed into her hands. Linda shook uncontrollably now. I stayed perfectly still. My dad finally let his shoulders fall. A small exhale. Almost a surrender. He whispered something so low it barely carried across the table. It was supposed to be quick. The room broke. Linda cried out. Claire collapsed into a chair. My dad stood frozen, staring at nothing. The brooch glowed in my hand, and I whispered quietly before I let myself breathe again. It is over. But I knew it was not. Not yet. Someone had to hear what the brooch had captured. Someone besides me. I turned away from the table and walked toward the front hall. No one tried to stop me. Not this time. The next chapter would not belong to them. It would belong to the truth. I walked down the front hall like my legs were not attached to me anymore. Somewhere behind me, Linda was crying. Those sharp, broken sounds that come from a place deeper than embarrassment. Claire kept saying the word dad over and over, like if she repeated it enough times it would turn him back into the man she thought he was. I did not look back. The brooch lay warm against my chest, the small recorder inside carrying 2 different lifetimes of truth. My mom's last night. My family's confession. Years of silence pressed into a piece of metal no bigger than a thumb. At the front door, I stopped and rested my hand on the knob. For a second, I let myself feel the house. The old wood. The weight of holidays gone wrong. The echo of my mom's laugh that still lived somewhere deep in the walls. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The air hit my face like a slap. It was bright and brutally honest in a way the house never was. Snow crunched softly under my shoes as I walked down the front steps. My car sat at the end of the driveway, coated in a thin layer of frost. I unlocked it and slid inside. The moment the door shut, the world went still. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. My fingers shook as I pulled it out. A message from the same unknown number. Are you out? I typed back with hands that barely obeyed me. Yes. Another pause. Did you get them? I looked down at the brooch. Yes. The reply came fast. Good. Do not go back in. Not for anything. I dropped my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. My mind replayed those last minutes in the dining room in ruthless detail. My dad's voice admitting what he had never admitted out loud. Linda's broken confession. The way the room fell apart when the truth finally landed. I had wanted that moment for years. And dreaded it all at once. Now that it had happened, I felt hollow and heavy in the same breath. I opened my eyes and forced my fingers to move. I unpinned the brooch and held it carefully in my palm. Then I opened my phone's voice recorder and set it near the tiny speaker on the back. I pressed the hidden button, the one my mom had pressed all those years ago. The small device vibrated and began to play the most recent recording. Their voices filled the car, a little muffled but clear enough. I sat through the whole thing, every line, every denial, every slip. My dad's low admission. It was supposed to be quick. Linda's broken confession that she had helped make my mom sick. The sound of Claire's sobs. My own voice, steadier than I remembered, saying that the truth did not belong to them anymore. When it ended, my phone showed the new file saved. I played back a few seconds. It was clear enough to cut through any lie. I saved it twice. Then I emailed it to myself. Then I uploaded it to a cloud drive I had created years ago and forgotten about. My mom had tried to leave proof, and someone had almost buried it. I was not taking that risk. I sat there a while longer, the engine still off, my breath fogging the glass. I knew what I had to do next. It felt too big and too obvious at the same time. I had to take it to the police. The thought scared me more than the confrontation had. At least in that dining room, I knew who I was dealing with. Out here, I had no idea who would believe me, or how far my dad's influence still reached. But my mom's voice echoed in my mind, clear and firm. If anything happens to me, this does not go away. I could not let it end in that house. Not again. I started the car. The engine coughed once and caught. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror. The front windows stared back at me like blank eyes. I did not look for anyone at the glass. I drove into town on roads I could have followed blindfolded. Every landmark felt like a memory I did not want. The old gas station, the church on the corner where my mom's funeral had been, the little diner where she used to take me for pancakes on Saturday mornings. My hands tightened on the wheel. The police station sat near the center of town, a squat brick building with a flag out front and a single bare tree by the dead sidewalk. I parked and sat in the car longer than I needed to, trying to pull myself together. Then I grabbed my phone and the brooch, slipped them both into my pocket, and walked inside. The air in the station felt dry and fluorescent. A woman sat behind the front desk, flipping through papers. She looked up as I approached and offered a polite, practiced smile. "Can I help you?" My voice sounded thinner than I wanted. "I need to report a crime. A serious one." She studied my face for a second, then nodded and slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out. Someone will be with you in a moment." My hand shook as I wrote my name and contact information, and a few vague lines about possible foul play in an old death and a new threat. It looked too small on paper, too simple, like it could not possibly hold the weight of what really happened. I handed it back. She read it, her eyebrows lifting slightly. Then she picked up a phone, spoke quietly, and told me to have a seat. The waiting room had a handful of chairs and an old pot of artificial flowers on a side table. A bulletin board held faded flyers and missing pet notices. The normalness of it all made my skin feel too tight. A tall man in a rumpled shirt stepped out from a side door after a few minutes. His hair was mostly gray, his eyes tired but kind. He said my name and I stood. He gestured toward an office down the hall. I followed him in. The room was small. He took a seat across from me and folded his hands on the desk. "Tell me what brought you in today." There it was. The opening. I took a deep breath and started with the only place that made sense. My mom's death was ruled natural cause 5 years ago. He nodded. "I have reason to believe it was not natural," I said, "and I have a recording that backs that up." He did not scoff. He did not lean back. He just went still, his eyes sharpening. "Go on." So I did. I told him about the text messages during Christmas dinner, about the wine, about the server who had been there when my mom died, and again tonight, about finding the brooch in her room with an old recording of my parents' argument, about the new recording from the dining room when everything finally cracked open. I did not embellish. I did not try to make it prettier or more dramatic. I just laid it out piece by piece, like evidence on a table. When I finished, the room felt heavier. He asked quietly, "May I hear the recording?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. My fingers fumbled as I opened the file. I set the phone on his desk and pressed play. We sat in silence as my dad's voice filled the room. The confession. Linda's broken words. The shock and horror. The lines no one could walk back. It was supposed to be quick. The detective did not react until the file ended. He reached over, stopped the playback, and let out a slow breath. He sat back slightly and rubbed his jaw. His eyes were different now. More focused. More cautious. "Your dad is Marcus Hale." I nodded. He exhaled again. "He is a known name around here." I knew what he meant. Business donations, community projects, old friendships. But he added, "That does not make him untouchable." He leaned forward again. "Did you keep the original device?" I nodded and showed him the brooch. His eyebrows rose as he studied it. "Your mom wore this the night she died." "Yes. And last night I used it again." He shook his head slowly, a mix of surprise and respect. "I am going to need to keep this and your phone for now," he said. "We will make copies, run them through our tech team, verify timestamps and authenticity, and we will need a formal statement from you. Likely several. Are you prepared for that?" I swallowed. "Yes." He nodded once. "Good. Because this is not going to be simple." He stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out a form. He told me his name, which I barely processed, and explained that an investigator would be assigned to reopen my mom's case, that there would be questions about why no one saw this earlier, how the first ruling was made, who signed off on it. I listened. It all felt distant. He asked if I felt safe going back to the house. No. He nodded again, as if he had expected that answer. "Do you have somewhere else you can go tonight?" "Yes. I can get a room in town, or drive back to Denver if I have to." He shook his head. "Stay in town. Someone will want to reach you as we move forward. And Julia." I looked up. "You did the right thing bringing this in." The words did not feel like comfort yet. Maybe they would later. I spent the next few hours in that station answering questions. First with him, then with another officer who took notes on everything I said. Times, names, exact phrases. They asked about my mom's health before she died, about my dad's relationship with Linda, about money, insurance, inheritance. By the time they were done, my throat hurt and my head pounded. The detective walked me out and handed me a card with his name and a number, written on it. "We will be in touch soon," he said. "Do not go back to the house. And if anyone from your family contacts you, let me know." The winter sky had darkened when I stepped outside. Street lights flickered on, casting pale circles on the wet pavement. I felt older than I had that morning. Older than I had yesterday. Older than I had been when my mom died. I drove to a small motel near the edge of town. The sign flickered and the parking lot was half empty. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as I signed in under my own name. Thin walls. Thin towels. But a door that locked and no history in it. That was all I needed. Inside the room, I sank down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For a long time, I did nothing. Just breathed and listened to the muffled sound of some television show playing in the next room. Eventually, I reached for my laptop. I opened it out of habit more than intention. The screen glowed in the dim room, asking for a password I had typed 1,000 times. When the desktop appeared, I watched the cursor blink on a blank document. Everything felt too big to fit into one file. Too painful to put into words. And yet, that was all I had left. Words and proof. I opened a browser and went to a site I used to scroll through on sleepless nights. A place where strangers told stories about revenge and justice and the quiet. Ways they had taken their lives back. People there did not know each other's real names. They knew something more important. The feeling of being betrayed by your own blood. My hands moved slowly at first, then faster. I started to type. I did not use real names. I did not use the town. I changed a few details for safety. But I told the truth. About a mom who had been called dramatic when she tried to speak. About a dad who cared more about control than love. About a stepmother who chose comfort over conscience. About a piece of jewelry that recorded what people said when they thought no one would ever hear it again. I wrote until my eyes burned and the words blurred. When I finished, I read it once, from beginning to end. It did not feel like enough. It did not feel like too much. It felt like exactly what it was. A confession. Not mine. Theirs. I hovered over the post button for a long time. The detective had his proof. The justice system would take its slow, grinding path. But there was another kind of justice that mattered too. The kind where the story does not disappear. Where it does not get rewritten by those who have power and money and a polished family image. I remembered my mom's last recorded words. If anything happens to me, this does not go away. I clicked a post. The screen refreshed. My story appeared with a simple title at the top. The first few comments arrived within minutes. Some people doubted. Some believed instantly. Some told their own stories in response. I sat back on the bed and let the glow of the screen wash over me. My eyes stung with tiredness. And something like release. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message from an unknown number. The same one. I heard they came to the house. Your dad did not look so confident when they let him out. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I typed, for not staying silent. The reply came back. Your mom thanked me first. I am just finishing what I promised her. I put the phone face down and lay back on the bed, fully dressed. The room smelled faintly of cleaning products and stale air. It did not smell like my childhood. It did not smell like grief. For the first time since I stepped into that house for Christmas dinner, I exhaled all the way. Things were far from over. There would be hearings and trials and arguments and accusations. There would be headlines and whispers, but the story was no longer buried. It was on a police server, on my email, in a cloud drive, inside a simple motel room, and now out there, in the hands of strangers who read late at night and recognize themselves in other people's pain. I closed my eyes. My mom's face rose in my mind, clear and steady. She did not look fragile. For the first time in a long time, I saw her the way she really was. Strong, tired, determined, just like me. Somewhere in the next room, the television shifted channels. A laugh track swelled, then faded. Cars passed outside in wet hisses. I rolled onto my side and let sleep pull me under at last. By morning, everything would look different, and by the time this was over, so would I. Sunlight woke me the next morning, not gently. It came through the thin motel curtains like someone had pulled them open by force. My eyes felt gritty and swollen. My clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in them. The room was cold enough that I could see a faint breath in the air when I exhaled. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then everything hit me at once. My dad's confession. Linda's collapse. Claire's trembling voice, the brooch humming against my chest, my mom's old words tangled with new truth. I sat up slowly. My body felt 10 years older. I rubbed my hands over my face and tried to gather myself. It was a strange kind of morning. Heavy but sharp. Quiet but electric. My phone lay on the nightstand where I had dropped it before falling asleep. The screen was lit with notifications. I picked it up. A message from the detective. A formal one. They had obtained a warrant at dawn. Officers had arrived at the house just after 6. Evidence had been collected. Both my dad and Linda were taken in for questioning. He wrote that I would be needed later today. Another message came from the unknown number, shorter than usual. Just 2 words. It started. I exhaled and held the phone against my forehead for a moment. Relief washed through me like warm water. But there was grief in it, too. Grief for everything that had been broken long before I tried to fix it. I showered, changed clothes, and packed my things with hands that still trembled. When I checked the mirror before leaving, I almost did not recognize myself. My face looked older, my eyes clearer, my shoulders straighter. At the motel front desk, the woman barely looked up as I checked out. She slid a receipt toward me. I walked outside into the cold morning air and stood there for a long moment, letting the cold steady me. I drove to the station with the heater blowing full blast. The town passed by in a blur of winter gray and low rooftops. The closer I got, the tighter something pulled inside my chest. When I walked in, the detective spotted me almost immediately. He met me halfway across the lobby. "We will go over a few details today," he said. "Then you can head back home for now." He led me down the same hallway as yesterday and into the same small office. Papers were spread across his desk now, along with a laptop and a printed transcript of the brooch recording. He asked me to go through the events again. Every moment, every sentence I remembered. He typed as I spoke. His fingers moved fast. He asked questions I did not expect. Questions I had not thought of myself. Each answer built a clearer picture of what had happened the night my mom died, and what had started to repeat itself at Christmas dinner. By the end of the interview, my throat hurt. He paused his typing, sat back, and studied me quietly. "I know this is hard," he said, "but you did the right thing." The words landed differently this time. I believed them. He stood and walked me to the front of the station. "If your family tries to contact you, call me. Do not answer them alone." I nodded. Outside, the day had warmed a little. The snow had softened into slush. A few people walked by wearing heavy coats and gloves, unaware that someone's life had just split down the middle in that brick building. I drove toward the edge of town, unsure where I was going or what I needed. I passed the church where my mom's funeral had been. I passed the grocery store where she used to chat with the cashier about recipes. I passed the old park where she once taught me how to ride a bike. It all felt like another life. Eventually, I pulled into a quiet overlook outside town. A wooden bench sat by a railing facing the rolling winter fields. I stepped out of the car and walked to the bench, sitting down slowly. The sky stretched pale and wide. The wind moved the tall dead grass in soft waves. Everything felt both empty and full. I closed my eyes. I let the silence settle. I let the cold bite at my hands. I let the truth of everything finally breathe. After a long time, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. Not the unknown number, not the detective. It was Claire. Just 2 words. "Is it true?" I stared at the screen. I typed back, "Yes." Her reply came quickly. A broken line. "I do not know who to believe." I took a long breath. Then I typed, "Believe the person who did not run." There was no answer after that. No dots typing. No follow-up. Just quiet. I sat there until my fingers went numb from the cold. Then I stood, brushed snow from my coat, and walked back to the car. I did not drive toward the house. I did not drive toward the motel. I drove toward Denver. Hours passed. The sky darkened. The road stretched out ahead of me like a ribbon, leading me back to a life I had built with my own hands. I reached my apartment just after dusk. The building looked exactly the same as I had left it. The same porch light, the same welcome mat, the same potted plant I kept promising myself I would replace. Inside, everything felt still, familiar, safe. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sank onto the couch, letting the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. My laptop sat on the coffee table where I had left it before the trip. I opened it and saw notifications from the story I posted the night before. Thousands of people had read it. Hundreds had commented. Some told me they were proud of me. Some shared their own stories. Some said they hoped justice would come. Some said they were listening while folding laundry or cooking dinner, sitting on their porch with a cup of tea. It felt strange. Beautiful. Human. One comment stood out. "Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You did the right thing." I closed my eyes and let that settle. I stood and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. The quiet felt good. No wine poured for me. No eyes watching me. No secrets pressing against the walls. My mom would never walk into this kitchen. She would never sit on my couch or comment on my curtains or ask if I was eating enough vegetables. But for the first time in a long time, I felt her close anyway. Not as a wound, as a voice, a strength, a promise carried forward. I picked up my phone again. This time I opened the camera app. I pressed record. My voice came out soft at first. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember something. I paused, feeling the truth settle deeper in my chest. Silence can be power. I looked into the camera, steady and calm, and truth can be the loudest revenge. I took a breath. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from. I ended the recording. A moment passed, a long breath, a quiet shift inside me. The story was finished, but I was not. I set the phone down. I turned off the kitchen light. I walked to the bedroom and pulled back the covers. Outside, the wind picked up against the windows. A soft howl. A whisper. The sound of something old finally leaving. I climbed into bed, the room dim and still, and let sleep take me without fear. My mom's last words echoed softly in the back of my mind. This does not go away. And it hadn't. Because I had carried it. Because I had faced it. Because I had spoken. And because some truths, once revealed, do not fade. They change everything.